Welcome to Balev, at the Heart, where we get to the heart of the Word of God. In Genesis chapters 1 and 2, in parts 1 and 2 of this series on gender matters, we saw that both men and women are created in God's image, and both reflect God's image through rulership or stewardship over the earth, and through relationship with God and with one another. We saw diversity within unity, complementarity reflecting different facets of the image of God. We saw that complementarity does not necessitate subordination, and that subordination based on gender cannot logically follow ontological equality. Thus far, we have witnessed God's Edenic ideal, humanity in fellowship with Him and with one another, and it is very good. As we know, things change in Genesis 3. In this part 3 of my Gender Matters series, we'll take a deep dive into Genesis 3:16 and Genesis 4:7. What changes do we see? What are the linguistic implications? I think we all know the cause for this change, but let's summarize to properly set the context. Genesis chapter 2 ends with these words, quote, "This is why a man leaves his father and his mother and clings to his wife, and they become one flesh. Now, both of them were naked, the man and his wife, and they were not ashamed," end quote. In our culture today, it is the father of the bride who walks his daughter down the aisle and gives her away to her husband. She leaves her father and goes to stand by her husband's side. Yet, at the end of Genesis 2, it is the man who leaves his parents to cling to his wife. What has caused this change? Enter Genesis 3 and the serpent. Beginning in verse 1, quote, "But the serpent was shrewder than any animal of the field that Adonai Elohim made. So it said to the woman, 'Did God really say, you must not eat from all the trees of the garden?' The woman said to the serpent, 'Of the fruit of the trees we may eat, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden, God said, you must not eat of it, and you must not touch it, or you will die.' The serpent said to the woman, 'You most assuredly won't die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil.' Now, the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a thing of lust for the eyes, and that the tree was desirable for imparting wisdom. So she took of its fruit, and she ate. She also gave to her husband, who was with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made for themselves loin coverings. And they heard the sound of Adonai Elohim going to and fro in the garden in the wind of the day. So the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Adonai Elohim in the midst of the tree of the garden. Then Adonai Elohim called to the man, and he said to him, 'Where are you?' Then he said, 'Your sound, I heard it in the garden, and I was afraid. Because I am naked, I hid myself.' Then he said, 'Who told you that you are naked? Have you eaten from the tree which I commanded you not to eat?' Then the man said, 'The woman you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate.' Adonai Elohim said to the woman, 'What did you do?' The woman said, 'The serpent deceived me, and I ate.' Adonai Elohim said to the serpent, 'Because you did this, cursed are you above all the livestock, and above every animal of the field. On your belly will you go, and dust will you eat all the days of your life. I will put animosity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. He will crush your head, and you will crush his heel.' To the woman he said, 'I will greatly increase your pain from conception to labor. In pain you will give birth to children. Your desire will be toward your husband, yet he must rule over you.' First, Genesis 2 ends with a statement that they are naked. Here in Genesis 3, God asks, who told you you were naked? And second, they were not ashamed. But here in chapter 3, when they realize they are naked, they are afraid and they hide. Now they are ashamed. What God created in Genesis chapters 1 and 2 changes. Both rulership and relationship change due to their disobedience, which we also know as sin. The pivotal moment for a change in relationship between Ish and Isha is expressed in Genesis 3:16. Your desire will be for your husband, yet he must rule over you. Both complementarians and egalitarians acknowledge a change for the worse in the relationships between men and women in this verse. Egalitarians believe that this is the moment when shared leadership devolves into patriarchy, whereas complementarians believe that this is the moment when women will begin to fight against patriarchy. The key word in this pivotal verse is teshukatek, the woman's desire. The woman's desire will be for her husband, and he will rule over her. Brown, Driver, and Briggs translate the word for desire, teshuka, as longing of woman for man in Genesis 3:16, as longing of man for woman in Song of Songs 7:11, and as longing of beast to devour in Genesis 4:7. The grammatical similarities between Genesis 3:16 and Genesis 4:7 are striking. Genesis 3:16b says, Ve'el ishek teshukatek vehu yishal bak. And Genesis 4:7b says, Ve'elecha teshukato va'ata timshal bo. Literally, word for word, they read as follows in Genesis 3:16b, and to your husband is your desire, and he will rule you. And in Genesis 4:7b, when sin crouches at Cain's door, and to you is its desire, and you will rule it. These are my literal word for word translations to show the direct parallels. The grammatical parallels between these two phrases lead to theological interpretations that equate sin's desire to master humanity with women's desire to master men. Ortland explains, quote, just as sin's desire is to have its way with Cain, God gives the woman up to a desire to have her way with her husband. Because she usurped his headship in the temptation, God hands her over to the misery of competition with her rightful head, end quote. According to this interpretation, to be a woman who is not subordinate to her man is to be the embodiment of sin. George W. Knight III recognizes the effect of sin to break relationships. In Genesis 3:16, quote, God is indicating that as a result of sin, rather than exercising a caring headship and leadership, men will seek to rule in an autocratic, unloving way. And he is indicating, with reference to women, that rather than being submissive helpers, they will desire to have mastery over their husbands, end quote. For complementarian theologians, what women desire is to struggle for power. In this view, women struggle for power, and women are parallel to the embodiment of sin itself. However, teshuka has another translation possibility. In Song of Songs 7 verse 11, teshuka clearly expresses sexual desire, not desire for power. Quote, it seems reasonable, therefore, to integrate teshuka with the first part of the verse, which relates to childbearing, and to suggest that it may be the woman's desire for the man, while essential to procreation, that draws and binds her to him. She is enslaved by her desire rather than by his dominance, end quote. This may also result in psychological dependence, as seen by Luton and Resnick. Grant Luton and Russ Resnick describe what they see as the current state of wives' reliance on husbands. Quote, a wife relies on her husband for her sense of vitality, self-worth, and self-respect. She looks to him for physical, emotional, and spiritual sustenance, end quote. Now, these comments describe the brokenness of the relationship between men and women. Rather than seeking the Lord for her worth and sustenance, she seeks from her husband what only God can give. Her husband, like her, is a creation. He is not the creator, and he cannot be God to her. A marriage wherein a wife looks to her husband for all manner of sustenance is not an ideal marriage. In fact, it borders on idolatry. Kathleen M. O'Connor says, quote, "She will desire him, love him, want to please him, and experience his love in return. But after eating the fruit, mutuality and equality disappear. Power between them becomes asymmetrical," end quote. Choosing to follow the created instead of the creator leads to brokenness. Choosing to follow the creator rather than the created is the way to return to his original design, even within a broken world that remains broken for now. Brokenness was caused by Eve listening to a created being, the serpent, instead of to her creator God, Genesis 3:13, and by Adam listening to a created being, his wife, instead of to his creator God, Genesis 3:17. Brokenness can be repaired by reversing that order, listening to the creator instead of the creation. Her offspring will thus crush the head of the serpent, Genesis 3:15. A life in God through faith in following Yeshua as the Messiah is a life redeemed from sin and the brokenness which results. Sin causes humanity's reflection of the image of God to tarnish, both in rulership and in relationship. The new norm expresses a state of brokenness. The unity that Ish and Isha experience in the Garden of Eden is broken with the sin of eating from the tree which Adonai said not to eat. After sinning, Ish and Isha hide from Adonai. When Adonai asks Ish if he has sinned, Ish blames Isha, and by extension, he also blames Adonai for giving him Isha. Isha blames the serpent for deceiving her. In the order of offense, Adonai curses the serpent, then tells Isha what the consequences of sin will mean for her, and finally addresses Ish, quote, "Because you listen to your wife's voice, the ground is cursed. Thorns and thistles will grow. You will work hard for your food, and you will return to the dust from which you were taken." The goodness of God's creation is broken, and there are serious consequences to sin. Man will become subservient to the ground from which he was formed, and woman will become subservient to the man from whom she was formed. In the beginning, Adam, male and female, were created by Adonai to follow Adonai. Adam was made by Adonai to follow Adonai. Isha was made by Adonai to follow Adonai. Both, male and female, were created by God for God. However, Isha does not obey the word of Adonai, but instead listens to the serpent. So she has placed another between herself and God. Likewise, Adam does not obey the word of Adonai, but instead listens to his wife. He has placed another between himself and God. Placing another between oneself and God is idolatry, and there are consequences. Adam, who was made from the Adamah, will serve the Adamah. Isha, who was made from the Ish, will now serve the Ish. These are the consequences of listening to another instead of God. The unity between male and female is affected by the entrance of sin into God's good design. Sin results in brokenness. Though humanity is created in the image of God, reflecting his attributes, the advent of sin causes humanity to reflect a tarnished image. Zvi Grumet identifies three central elements affected by the first sin. Quote, the ability to be productive, the pain involved in doing so, and subservience to one's origin, end quote. Man's productivity, his fruitfulness, will be challenged with the producing of bread. Woman's productivity, her fruitfulness in bearing children, will be fraught with pain. She will experience pain in childbirth. He will experience pain in bringing produce from the ground. He who was created from the dust of the earth will become subservient to the dust of the earth. She who is created from the rib of man will become subservient to man from whom she was created. Genesis 3, verses 16 through 19. Though created as equal and distinct in the image of God, who is subservient to none, sin introduces subservience into human existence. Humanity's deterioration is a result of disobedience to the will of God. When Adam and Eve choose to disobey their Creator, they become subject to that from which they were created. Adam to the ground, and Eve to Adam. The subservience of woman to man is a result of the curse of sin. He shall rule over you, Genesis 3:16. The unity between male and female is broken. In summary, God's design for women at creation is to reflect His image. God creates women to be different from men, to be fitting counterparts in relationship with one another, and equal participants in the command to rule the earth and subdue it. The effects of sin include brokenness of relationship and brokenness in shared rulership, resulting in patriarchal leadership that often diminishes the contributions of women. However, good news is coming, and, in fact, is already prophesied. Yeshua, the promised seed of the woman, will crush the head of the serpent. He repairs the brokenness, and He brings restoration, restoring men and women to reflect the multifaceted image of God together. We're still at the beginning of the story. We'll continue getting to the heart of biblical gender matters in part 4.